Hello students, this is Veena, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today, we will focus on all the definitions and terminology related to the word communication. We all know that it is the most important word in today's scenario. To grow ourselves, to make ourselves visible and vibrant among the group or the workspace, it is very, very important to have and possess all the qualities of a good communicator. So, for that reason, you must be able to understand the relevance, importance and the terminology which is related to the communication skills. So, today we will try to understand all the terms which are associated with communication and their meaning. Let us get started. Here. First, let us rightly know and understand the right definition of communication. Communication is the exchange of meanings between individuals through a common system of symbols. That is, we are exchanging the expressions, the meanings, the informations between two in the way of communication. That is through common system of symbols or through common mode of electronic gadgets. We are trying to exchange the informations such that we can understand each other and develop that relationship and also cater the needs of our professional and personal entities. Communication is the act of giving, receiving and sharing information. It is the act of giving, receiving and sharing information. In other words, talking or writing, listening or reading. That is, these are the four important skills which are integrated in the development of your communication skills. Rightly said as listening, speaking, reading and writing. Four elements which are essential in the development of the acquisition of good communication skills. Good communicators listen carefully, speak or write clearly and respect different options or opinions. That is, we are being good listeners and also we are being good writers and also readers and also trying to communicate the messages qualitatively and efficiently. So, these are all the technical terminological words which are associated with the word communication and also helpful in the development of your better communication skill in the workplaces and on the personal levels. Now, we have 7 types of communications. Communication takes place at different levels and accordingly we can speak differently. That is, we are not just talking about one essential element or in one situation. We confront with different kind of situations and the levels or the positions which we require to. So, there are different types of communication which rightly use in our day-to-day life and we have to know about the definitions and the terminology and their use and practice in the relevant situations and time. Now, first one, it is verbal communication, non-verbal communication, written communication, visual communication, feedback communication, mass communication and group communication. Generally, we come across through these different types of communications. So, now let us try to define them in detail and understand the terminology as well as the usage and the practice in the way of developing our effective communication. Now here, types of communication. It is an act of transmitting information, ideas and attitudes from one person to another. Thus, the communication takes place among individuals belonging to various categories and backgrounds. They put into operation various types of communication. So, depends on the purpose and the usage of our day-to-day amenities. We try to communicate with other person. We may communicate with one we may communicate it with two, or we may communicate with a group or a bunch of people in the way of catering or possessing our needs. So how is that we are rightly going to do? With which type of communication we are rightly going to do that and acquire the information which we are in need, or provide the information which others are in need must be useful. So now here we have verbal, written, non-verbal, mass, visual, group and feedback communications. Now let us try to understand each one of them in detail. Here, verbal communication. In verbal communication, words of a particular language are used for passing the message. That is, we are trying to use one particular language, words, the vocabulary, in delivering the message to the other person. That is, we are making use of our language, whichever we are using as a common mode to address the other person. That is called your verbal communication through the use of language. For example, while teaching in a class, teacher speaks, writes on the blackboard, or sometime he or she may use audio or visual aids such as the PowerPoint presentations to explain or emphasize certain points. Now, depends on the situation, the teacher used the tool, isn't it? While giving the lecture, she talks to you, she speaks to you. While writing on the board, she writes the written communication. Sometimes she make use of audio or video aids, and sometimes she use the PowerPoint presentations. It depends on the purpose and the need for which it is very, very useful to communicate with the person. How effective and how qualitative and how accurately you are using the modem to communicate with the other people is very, very essential. So here verbal communication is also one of the most important element which you all have to remember, practice and make use to make your communication skills more better and effective. All these modes come under the category of verbal communication. Thus, verbal communication is of two types. So, it can be intrapersonal communication and one more, it can be interpersonal communication. Now, let us rightly define what is intrapersonal communication. When communication takes place within oneself, it is called intrapersonal communication. When I am trying to self-reflect myself or opinionate myself or try to judge or assess myself, that is self-evaluation, it may come under the intrapersonal communication. Talking to oneself, I am trying to talk to myself and provide the reasoning or the necessity of selecting a solution or formulating a message or giving a information. So, I am trying to self-evaluate by talking myself. This intra-communication. Intra-communication includes prayers addressed to the divine through some authors describe communication with the divine as transpersonal communication. We can take the example of our talk to the God too as intrapersonal communication, because we are talking to oneself while praying. Some eminent scholars or some researchers, they term it as transpersonal communication, but it also come under the intrapersonal communication. Then, interpersonal communication. What is this interpersonal communication? Interpersonal communication takes place between two people. When there are two people, when they are talking to each other and conversing, knowing the same language with the same common language, understanding the feelings with each other or sharing the emotions and the information which is needed on that particular ground is your interpersonal communication, where exchange of ideas, exchange of thoughts or expressions will happen. This includes dialogues, conversation or exchange of views between two persons without using any technological devices like the telephone. Here, in the interpersonal communication, we are talking to the person who is right with us, and here we are not using any kind of electronic gadget or any kind of other modem which will make you far away from the other person. So you're trying to exchange your ideas or your thoughts or your expressions or the information, whatever you want with your friend in the personal level. That is your interpersonal communication. It is direct, intimate, and consists of verbal interaction or gestures. It is completely direct and it is innate, very close, and it consists of verbal interaction through gestures or through the verbal talk. Whatever it may be, it is completely personal, and also it may be one-to-one, and here we are using the same language to understand each other's feelings, expressions, thoughts, or whatever it is needed. Then comes oral communication. What is this oral communication? Oral communication can be rightly defined as a communication that employs the spoken word, either direct or indirect, as a communication channel. That is oral speaking, whether it is direct or indirect. That is, I'm talking through my phone. It is also oral communication. I'm talking anywhere, standing at any place and talking some information or providing some information. That is your oral communication, which you can do anywhere using any kind of modem or any kind of electronic gadget. This verbal communication could be made on a channel that passes information in only one form, that is sound. That is, you can use your telephone, you can use any kind of electronic gadgets, audio, video, any way to exchange your ideas or the information, whatever you want to render it to the other person. Oral communication is rightly the communication employs the spoken words. It depends on the speech, the sound. What is that you're going to address to the other person is your oral communication. Next, public communication. What is this public communication? It is the sender-receiver. That is, the speaker sends a message to an audience. Talking in front of a large gathering or a small group of gathering is your public communication. That is, you are standing before a large group, that is an audience, to address them or about some particular topic, information, or presenting your presentations about your research, articles, your thesis, anything. That which is one to many is your public communication. You're trying to exchange the information with a lot of members, with a group, is your public communication, which is not personal, which is completely public, that is spoken in the way of public communication. The speaker usually delivers a highly structured message using the same channels as in and interpersonal and small group communication. Here, his highly structured message, that is, that which is planned, that which is organized, that which is rendered rightly to the other person. Even in the interpersonal communication, we try to make ourselves prepared in the way of communicating our ideas or our thought process or any kind of information, or trying to resolve some problems. It is done in that way of communication. Rightly, in the same way, even the public communication, we do the same. But here, it is to the large gathering, while in interpersonal, it is only to one individual. Non-verbal communication. Now, what is this non-verbal communication and how is that you're going to use it? Communication without using words such as gestures, body language, the facial expressions is called non-verbal communication. It is not at all compulsory to use the verbal communication always. Sometimes depends on the situation, time, location and the necessity of the other person rendering the message. You can use the non-verbal communication too to express your message in the form of the body language, the gestures or the postures. You can deliver the message. If that person is able to understand, then the communication is successful. Often non-verbal expression supplement verbal communication. We generally use both gestures, body language as well as the verbal communication one with the other. But sometimes we also use a body language gesture to render that message when we cannot talk or speak in front of others. But it may be the only one, as mentioned earlier. While giving a speech in a rally, the leader often gestures to emphasize certain points, but the teacher may allow a student to enter the class simply by gestures. Now we have two examples. The politician, while giving speech in a crowd, how is that? He tried to grasp the attention of the audience with the gestures along with the speech. Both of them together he uses to attract the audience. So there he uses both verbal and as well as non-verbal communication. But on the other side, if a teacher giving permission to the boy to come into the class, she can just use a gesture of her hand instead of saying come in. So here we have different situations. Depending on the situation, we can use the gesture or the body language or any kind of communication that can be verbal or non-verbal. Here, non-verbal communication is of following types. Now, how is that this communication is addressed? Through the body language, facial expressions, postures, gestures, the touch, the feeling of touch, appearance and arty crafts. These are all the ways where the non-verbal communication can happen effectively. But how well you are trying to make the gestures and your body language applicable and suitable to render the possible message qualitatively to the others must be understood. You cannot just make any kind of gesture to project some message to the other person. The other person who is trying to reciprocate with you must be able to understand what is your gesture addressing or how is that your gesture is pointing out towards the message. So, while using the body language and the gestures, you all must have that awareness over what is the information which you are going to provide it to other person. Is my body language or my gestures are rightly suiting such that I'll be able to pass the message or information rightly to the other person. So this is the most important thing which everyone has to remember when it comes to your non-verbal communication. Next, written communication. One of the most important way of communication, especially when it comes to your profession lives, which you all have to master over. Written communication will reflect your personality and the attitude to your superiors. That shows your confidence and your awareness over the situation or the project which you are trying to handle. So, when you are making or trying to prepare your documentation work, prepare them authentically, accurately and try to be very, very precise enough to render the right quality of information through your projects or your mails, whatever you use in the way of written communication. We have to be very careful enough to address formally to all our superiors when it comes to your written communication. You cannot move out of the box and talk something or use shortcuts or use more number of abbreviations instead of using the right structure of sentence formations. So, when it comes to written communication, you need to have much practice over it. You need to have mastery over it to excel and look unique among so many people in your workplaces. Now, let us try to define this word written communication. This kind of communication involves any kind of exchange of information in written form. Information which is exchanged in written form is your written communication. Written language communication is communication by means of written symbols that is communicated by or to or between people or groups. Now this written communication, it can be delivered to one person, it can be delivered to many people or any number of people whom you want to address to. Here you have to be very careful enough to address it properly and formally when it comes to your professional arenas. But when it comes to your personal level, you can use the informal set of language to deliver your letter or your email address whom you love or whom you know, and you know that you can talk to them informally. But stick to the formal nature of writing your documentation works, your journals, your articles, whatever you do, whatever you work. Try to develop that formal quality in your writing skills such that it will be helpful to you in further growth of your professions. Thus, written communication is the presentation of ideas or essays that make a clear point, supply details supporting that point, and demonstrate unity and coherence. So, while writing, you must remember that it must be clearly pointed and supply details supporting the point, and also demonstrate the unity and coherence through your write-ups. So, when you specially take up your research work, specially make or formulate your articles, it is very, very essential to stick to the point, write according to the point, have all the awareness over the point, and develop your write-ups logically, organizing with right steps. You must have proper introduction of your keynote, key point, proper body and the conclusion about the writer. See that you maintain the unity and the coherence, that is the relationship between one point to the others. If your write-up is messed up with so many ideas, see that you segregate those ideas into different paragraphs while having the interlink between each paragraph, and then concluding it with all the relevant ideas which are important for the reader to understand it. So, written communication cannot happen or cannot master over it within a day or two. You must be able to understand what it is. You must be able to practice. You must know certain grammatical structures to master over your written communication. So, be prepared enough and practice. Write up, jot down the necessary important points, make the rough drafts, plan properly, sequence the steps of the key points in the logical order, organize them, and then put forward in the way of your write-up such that you can make use of effective communication in the growth of your professional lives. Now, visual communication. What is this visual communication? How is that we are going to make use of this visual communication? Let us try to define it. The word visual communication. Visual communication is also the type of communication that is common in the day lives of individuals. The main areas through which visual communication take place: televisions, radios, social networking, and so forth. This is the most commonly used communication these days, isn't it? We try to use all the electronic gadgets with visuals. That is, we give more preference to the video aids rather than audio aids in this generation. We prefer PPT presentations. We prepare any kind of story write-ups, any kind of material through visual process. So, it is effective and also appealing while pleasing the audience to grasp the attention. Your social media, television, all these come under the category of visual communications. When the individuals are watching television or listening to radio programs, then also they are engaged in the form of communication. If I am watching TV, that means that I am engaged in the visual communication. If I am listening to the audio of the radio, that means I am engaged in the audio communication. So, it is also a way of communication which may happen from one side, but I am trying to understand the message or anything that which is put up there through the television or the radio. So this is also the major means of communication. While your presentation, you can make use of PowerPoint presentation as your visual aids in creating that effectiveness in the mode of your communication and pleasing your audience and providing that clarity over what you are pointing towards them or providing the information to them. Next, feedback communication. Now, what is this feedback communication? When the individuals who are in leadership positions in educational institutions and in various forms of organizations such as instructors, supervisors, heads, directors, employers, and so forth, put into operation various types of assessment methods to evaluate the performance of the individuals, that is, the people, the superiors who evaluate us in the form of assessing through the proper tool is your feedback communication. After evaluating the performance, they provide their feedback in terms of their performance. Hence, the communication that takes place is termed as feedback communication. Once your teacher or your professor has assessed your paper, he comes back with the feedback to your answer script and he talks to you in the form of providing the feedback to your written tool, whatever has done. So while providing the feedback which is provided by the people is called as feedback communication. That is, they are responding to what has happened and providing us with some suggestion regarding the thing what has evaluated. Therefore, within educational institutions at all levels and various types of organizations, this type of communication is regarded as most crucial and beneficial for your improvement and for your continuous comprehensive evaluation. This is the type of communication which is always chosen by your organization or the institution, because to propose that change in your evaluation process, to bring about the change in the assessment, we try to provide the feedback to you such that you improve at yourself at various levels and your continuous comprehension evaluation will make you as beneficial as improving you in your subjects. So this is the most important communication which is mostly regarded as crucial and beneficial to the students and the employees if it is done through any organization. Then mass communication. What is this mass communication? It is rightly defined as the process of delivering information, ideas and attitudes to a sizable and diversified audience. That is, mass communication is the communication which happens with the sizable, that is large size, with people of many diverse audience. There are n number of audience who belong to different sets. So here we are addressing them in a mass group, in a huge group which is very sizable and which is very huge. This is done through the use of media developed for that purpose, namely newspapers, magazines, radio, televisions, websites, social media networks. So this is all comes under the electronic media, who is trying to address large gatherings with different selective religions, regions and whatever is applicable. That is, trying to provide information to large mass through their effective communication. That is what the newspapers do, the radios, the television, the social media networks all come under the mass communication. The act of mass communication is much more complex, very, very complex than that of face-to-face communication. It is very complex and it has all its own essentialities which must be addressed. Only then the mass communication will be effective in the way of providing the necessary information to the large gathering. It is addressed to the masses, to an extremely large audience. If a program is telecasted on the television, it is visual to all over the country and maybe to all over the world. That means the mass communication has its impact over the entire nation or entire world sometimes too. So this is the huge way of representing the information through the effective communication channels. So here mass communication is playing very vital role these days in the way of providing the information through the electronic gadgets, namely the televisions, the radios, the social networkings and internet websites, whatever it may be. Then group communication. Now, what is this group communication and how is it rightly defined? Communication by many persons in a face-to-face situation is described as a group communication. That is, when people are sitting together as a group and trying to converse with each other, and each one of them are trying to present their own thoughts, ideas and expressions in the form of information, is called the group communication. Here, as the group grows in size, communication tends to become more and more of a monologue, reducing participation. If the group is more, it may become monologue. That means one person may be talking and it will look as if he is addressing the audience. But if the group is less and there is the interaction between all the members of the group, sharing the information, sharing the expression of thoughts and ideas, that can become a mode of group communication. The degree of directness, therefore, depends on the size of the group, the place where it meets, and also the relationship of the members of the group to one another. How is that the interpersonal communication is happening in the group? How is that one is able to communicate the ideas or the thoughts or the message through the conversation? How is that the opinions of all the group members is taken and they have come to a one conclusion on the same level? So the GDs, the group discussions, depends on the size of the group too. If the group is large, then it will be very difficult to make the quality of the information there. If the group is precise, then everyone can have the opportunity to put up their opinions and ideas, and they also can help you in catering with the needy information, and their solutions for some problems can be resolved. In a group, communication feedback is more difficult to measure and respond to. Of course, it is very difficult, because if everyone try to talk at a time in a group, then that will be a problem. You must be able to understand the etiquettes of the group communication. When you are in a group, you have to give chance to the others, lend your ears as listeners, and being active listeners, you can try to understand each one's opinion in the group. If not, if you're trying to talk, if every one of the group is trying to talk, then there will not be any conclusion or any qualitative information will be given through that group discussion. Then, communication terminology. Now, let us try to understand some terminology which is completely rendering or reflecting on the communication. That is, communicator. Who is a communicator? That is a sender or a source who is sending the message. The speaker, writer, or some kind of signaler. Then, what is a message in communication? The content of what is to be communicated, that is the thoughts, the ideas, information, instructions, etc. This comes under the message. Then, audience. Who are your audience? The receiver. The listener is your audience. The listener, the reader, the viewer, they are all your audience when it comes to communication. Then, statement of purpose. What is the purpose? Desired response or the purpose. What the communicator wants to audience to do. That is, when I am delivering a speech, what is that I am expecting from them? I am expecting to make them understand and interpret in the same way I am rendering the message. That means what I am feeling, I want to get the same from the audience. Then communication channel. What is the communication channel? It is the medium through which you are communicating. The means used to get the message from sender to receiver. That is the fax, the email, the telephone, etc. Environment. What is environment when it comes to the communication? The setting in which the communication takes place. The place where the communication is taking place is your environment. Then feedback. The information that is given back about the message. That is the information when I'm talking, if the other person is responding to me in providing the feedback, that is your feedback. Then communication barriers. What are the communication barriers? The noises, the disturbances, whatever causes difficulties during your communication process. So these are all the terms which are associated with the word communication and which you all have to know and also try to define them. Only when you can define them, you can practice them. Once you can practice them, you can put them in the form of usage and make your communication more better and effective. So here the transaction model of communication, how the model of communication is being placed and how is it worked according to the transaction model. Here physical or psychological context. Here first it begins with the communicator encoding the message, that is through all these grounds co-creation of meaning happens, and here the person, the communicator, is decoding the message, that is the sender and the receiver. And what is the phenomena which is happening in between? That is in relation to the meaning which has to be passing from one person to the other. We will try to make it through social context or cultural context or relation context or physical. So we have so many contexts through which we try to send the message or information. It can be social, it can be cultural, it can be psychological or physical, or it can be relational. Whatever it may be, you try to decode the meaning which has been passed from the sender to the receiver. Now in between all that you have the barrier. What is the barrier? The noise, the disturbance. If you can overcome this noise or any kind of disturbance in between you and the other person whom you are communicating, the success of rendering the encoding and decoding of the message happens. So this is the right channel of making your communication possible. So, rightly understand the terminology and the definitions of all the words which are associated to communication. Try to improve yourself in the way of developing good accent, pronunciation, and also add all those words to your dictionary which will make you look unique and also make your professional life a success and reach to the heights of pinnacles. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.